In the basement of my home, we hold the most feared enemy of our pack. Chapter 24, 𝐿𝐤𝐳. Elijah Hayes, she didn't listen. I told her it wasn't safe. I told her. She just didn't listen. I can't blame her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐧. That Shredder is her mate, and there's nothing any of us can do about it. I don't agree with it, any of it. I don't agree with her being with him, and I don't agree with what my parents and brother are doing to him. I can't say any of that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐧. Gray's my sister, so I understand my parents' point of view. It's been 17 years since we last had contact with Gray. Now I chose to blame my Uncle Riley for what happened. But Mom doesn't. Mom met Uncle Riley when she was 16. He was only 3 at the time. Uncle Riley was the one real reason my mom stayed with Dad at first. From stories that I've heard from her, Dad and others like my Uncle Andrew and my Aunt Carissa, Mom and Dad didn't exactly get along. Mom was originally a rogue. She was against pack life in every way. Obviously, my father being an alpha would have caused tension between the two of them. To be short, Mom hated Dad, and Dad didn't exactly make a great first impression. My mother wanted to turn around and just leave him. My Aunt Carissa used the term, kill him, once or twice, as well, but chose to stay because of Riley. It was because of that little boy that Mom and Dad have stayed together. That's the basic reason why Mom refuses to think Gray's kidnapping is Riley's fault. She loves Riley, and believes that if he hadn't been involved with Shredders, none of this would have happened. She blames the Shredders for corrupting him. That just adds another layer of her hatred for Shredders. Not only did she believe they were and Uncle Riley, who she would probably die for, they also stole her only daughter. I was only 4 when Gray was taken from us, but I still vividly remember my mother breaking down not only in front of me but the entire pack. That was one of the last times I had ever seen my mother show much emotion. She blamed herself for Gray being taken too. Sure, she knew if it weren't for a group of Shredders ripping through our pack, Gray would have grown up like a Norlog Alpha's child. But she couldn't help but think she helped them. Dad wanted her to stay with Gray. I'm sure as hell wasn't a weak wolf, and she was honestly a fair fight against Dad. Mom was strong. Gray was safest with her. But like I said, Mom would do anything to save Riley. She truly believed that if she just spoke with him, she could make him come back. She couldn't. Mom left Gray with 2 of our strongest warriors while she went out to the backyard hoping to find Riley. She found him all right. Not only did he snap her neck when she found him, but he also broke her heart. She woke up 2 days after having her best friend, who was practically a brother, snap her neck. The first thing she did was cry. She cried because of Riley. But then she heard the news of Gray. She was completely broken. She cried for days. She blocked everyone out. I didn't see my own mother for nearly 2 weeks. She just sat in Gray's nursery and cried. She would skip various meals. She wouldn't sleep. Then one day, she just came out and wasn't the same. Everyone spoke so highly of my mother. Alex Ricardo may have been a psychotic rogue, but Alex Hayes was not. She changed. Alex Hayes was kind and caring, but a bitch when necessary. She was the type of woman to convince the devil to commit suicide or just flat out murder him herself. My mother knew just what to say and just how to say it. She was persuasive, bull-headed, and overall just a great alpha. She was a good mom, good wife, good friend. After losing Riley and Gray, she lost that side of herself. Dad went insane. Jail was a psychopath. No one was surprised when my mother went crazy herself. They called her a lunatic. My entire family turned completely mad, which then turned the pack completely mad. Most days, I felt like I was the only sane person left. Everyone else was dead set on ripping apart whoever they needed to find Gray. It got so bad that my Uncle Ashton, who's a warrior from the Werewolf Council, had to come and stay with Mom for a while. Uncle Ashton and Mom are siblings, Ashton being the younger of the 2. My Uncle Andrew's their adopted brother. He's the oldest of the three, leaving Mom in the middle. Mom and Dad were actually extremely close to being charged for many accounts of murder until Uncle Ashton stepped in. He and his mate, my Aunt Carissa, has to come and stay with the pack for nearly a year, about 3 years after Gray was kidnapped. This was about the time that Mom and Dad decided to calm down their search on Gray. There were rumors that Gray wasn't even alive anymore. They never stopped searching. They just stopped tripping apart entire packs. Like I said, they were nearly being charged for mass murder. It was points like that made me so against the torture of Kieran. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I may not love the dude, but Gray does. Kieran's a shredder. Gray's point of view on him is obviously much different than any pack wolf's. We know what shredders do. A pack of just for shredders, including Riley, ripped through our main pack house holding nearly 70 people and managed to kill 20. All 4 of them got away with very minimal harm. Shredders were not stupid. It was stories like these that made people so scared of shredders. What really made people terrified of shredders? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, was the fact that no one really knew about them. Shredders are like rogues, but on steroids. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Like Mom was, is a wolf with no pack. Rogues can be born into the lifestyle, but more times than not they are thrown out of their pack. Wolves are forced to leave their packs for many reasons, but usually they are things like murder or pack treason. Some wolves even leave packs on their own accord, which I never understood. Mom never really told us why she left her pack. Once a wolf leaves its pack, it becomes its own alpha, so it has no rules to follow. This usually causes them to go power hungry. They kill what they want and do what. They're reckless. Shredders are a bit different. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. From what generations of wolves have gathered, shredders share similarities of rogue wolves, but shredders usually group together in little packs of 2s. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. While rogues are reckless and whatnot, shredders are extremely intelligent. They cover the tracks well and work well together. Shredders oftentimes rip through entire packs in the night, and people don't even realize that they've slaughtered half of their pack until they wake up the next morning. If it weren't for sprinters and howlers, there's a good chance that shredders would have managed to take over not only the werewolf world but the human world as well. Sprinters and howlers are to other types of wolves similar to shredders. Only difference is that there are definitely more shredders than sprinters and howlers. It's almost funny to think about. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Seeing as how I could go find a sprinter easily, but I'd be extremely lucky to find another shredder that wasn't Kieran, Marilyn, and the other one that I can't recall. Shredders are smart and stay hidden until they want to make an appearance. They're a rare breed. They're also every pack wolf's worst nightmare, which is the main reason why they're locked in cells in the pack house cellar. Personally, I don't think it's smart keeping them so close to the pack, but 𝐊𝐢 doesn't. Then again, there's a good chance that 𝐊𝐢 is keeping them down there because it's the opposite of what I think is right. 𝐊𝐢 and I haven't ever really gotten along after everything, especially when he came of age to be alpha. Many members of the pack jury went against it. They thought 𝐊𝐢 was too violent. They thought he would just cause more war than anything. They didn't want 𝐊𝐢 to be alpha. They wanted me to be. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I couldn't be at the time. I was only 14 when 𝐊𝐢 turned 18. I was young, and trying to take the alpha title from an alpha himself being only a child was literally suicide. I had only shifted to years before that time. 𝐊𝐢 was strong. He had connected with his wolf, and Dad trained him to be the strongest alpha that there was. I don't think he had 𝐿𝐤 in mind while training y'all because I can almost promise that 𝐿𝐤 is stronger. 𝐿𝐤, the shredder, my baby sister's mate. I wasn't exactly pleased to know that my sister was mated to a shredder. Not to mention, the leader of a group of them. But it's not like I could do anything about it. My parents don't exactly understand. 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐤 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝. They worry more about the aspect of her safety. They worry more about how 𝐿𝐤 acts as a shredder rather than how he treats her as a mate. I could lie and say that I haven't eavesdropped on their conversations. I could say that he is a monster and is planning on murdering her the moment he gets out. I could stand in front of 𝐿𝐤, look her in the eye, and tell her that her mate's true agenda in life is to kill everything and anything including her. But why would I? Why would I do that if I know it's not true? I don't even have a mate. And I know that no mate would hurt their mate. Well, that's not true. Marilyn seemed to have a pretty fun time murdering hers. But to fair, he did reject her. Mom and Dad just don't see that. 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝. How can they not see that? They're mates. They should know this stuff. But they just ignore what they damn well know is true. They know 𝐿𝐤 would never hurt 𝐿𝐤. They're just scared of losing her again. I don't think I'll ever be able to unhear Mom scream as she walked into the training room to find 𝐿𝐤 unconscious on the floor. I was all the way on the 4th floor. And I heard her. When I arrived upon the scene, 𝐿𝐤 was unconscious on the floor as Mom cried. She was kneeling over 𝐿𝐤 as blood ran down her cheek from a gash and blood soaked her shirt around the bottom left of her stomach. Her shirt was torn. It was obvious there was another large gash. And she was losing a lot of blood. It didn't last long before she literally passed out from losing so much. That sent Dad into a literal panic as he picked both her and 𝐤 up and bolted for the pack doctor. Every pack has one. We have 4 in the area. But only one lives in the main house. You can't take a wolf to a human hospital. That's insane. I don't really understand how we all missed the mark. 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝. The doctor hadn't noticed it. Or maybe she just thought it had been there from before 𝐤 came back home. Mom didn't notice. Dad didn't. y'all didn't. And neither did I. Not until 𝐤 did. I have to hand it to 𝐿𝐤. Sure. Marking 𝐤 was pretty much suicide for him, seeing as how now wants nothing more than to kill 𝐿𝐤 for touching his little girl. But whatever physical pain is inflicted on 𝐿𝐤 feels. He knew exactly what he was doing. By marking 𝐤, no one can do anything to physically hurt him. Now, that doesn't say Dad still won't flood his system with liquid silver every chance he gets. But his body will soon recover from all of the gashes and bruises. He'll be nearly as strong as before. Plus, 𝐤 still continues feeding them, so he's not exactly starving to death either. Mom is torn. She was against putting 𝐿𝐤 in Lock 9. And surprisingly enough, so was Dad. Mom felt for basically beating 𝐿𝐤 to death. But that's just how Mom is. She's frightful and full of anger. She'll always have a soft spot for 𝐤. 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐷𝐞𝐝. She wants to get along with 𝐤 and still protect her from 𝐿𝐤. It was y'all and Trevor who decided it was necessary to place 𝐿𝐤 in Lock 9. I'm not sure that y'all even knows that Dad and I had 𝐿𝐤 moved back to his cell. It sure as hell was not easy, but seeing 𝐤 cry like that was 10 times harder. Dad didn't question me when I came to him stating that we needed to get 𝐿𝐤 out. I assume he had a hunch it was taking a toll on 𝐤 even if he had no clue I had taken her down there. Dad would do anything for 𝐤 that didn't involve the shredders. Dad was surprisingly the reason 𝐿𝐤 was still standing today. Jael and Trevor wanted him dead as soon as he was questioned the first time. But Dad wouldn't allow it. He never said why. He just wouldn't allow it. No one really had half of a mind to defy my father. He may not be alpha anymore, but he was. And he was definitely a force to be reckoned with. Alex and Grayson Hayes were pretty much legends amongst werewolf packs for reasons both good and bad. I sighed as I quietly opened the cellar door. None of the guards bothered to question me as I did so. I was the alpha son who everyone was convinced hated the shredders. Why would they say anything? As far as they knew of, I was just coming down to torture them for fun or something. They were just guards. They couldn't stop me from being a malicious asshole. I made sure to shut the door behind me so that they couldn't hear anything before making my way to them. The one whose name I couldn't quite remember was slumped against the back wall of the cell as he whistled a tune that I was unfamiliar with. His face was dirty and bruised as a small scar made its way down his right brow. He stopped whistling when his blue eyes landed on me. He surprised me with a smile. "Oh, Eli, how nice of you to stop by." I only nodded, not sure of what else to say. I looked in the cell next to him to find Marilyn not there. He must have noticed my confusion. Blondie took her for questioning again. I asked, turning me a nod. Why would he be questioning her? She hasn't been questioned since like the first week we found them. Oh, I replied, pushing the thought of them away. I turned to face Kieran, who was slumped against his cell eyeing me. "Hello." He didn't reply. He just continued watching me carefully. It seemed like minutes were passing as just watched me closely. His dark green eyes watching my every move, making me extremely conscious of the way I was breathing. The color in his face was returning. Deep gashes from days prior were now healing. And his hair was still just as disheveled from when he was in Lock 9. The bags under his eyes didn't look as bad as earlier. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐊𝐢𝐳 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐵. I assumed he hadn't slept while in Lock 9, so when he got back to his cell he used the opportunity to rest. "I like you, Eli," Kieran said, suddenly taking me by surprise. For some reason I was expecting something more along the lines of, "Open this cell so I can rip you apart, and I can play John Probe with your intestines." But okay, I really mean that. "I do. You make my mate happy," he continued. "I do what I can." Standing in front of Kieran made me want to hide behind my mom, to be honest. He was locked in a freaking cell lined with silver. And I still was terrified he was going to freak free and throw me down the hall like a ragdoll. I had no clue how Gray could be around them and not have thoughts like this. "Why'd you do it?" I asked quickly. Kieran raised his eyebrow at me. "Do what exactly?" "I do a lot of things." He chuckled humorlessly. In any other situation, I would be looking down at Kieran as if he were the scum of the earth. He's murdered people. He's a shredder. He's the bad guy in every story. Not this one. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐵. Not in Gray's story. In Gray's story, he's the love of her life. He's the knight in shining armor. Her point of view has changed the bad guys to the good guys. It's almost insane because if you were to look at it the way Mom sees it, she would just be protecting her daughter from what happened to Riley. Kieran would have the bad guy. Hell, I would have been a bad guy for helping Gray see him. The mark. I shot out quickly. He gave a smug look that made him look literally insane as the other non stayed quiet. "You know exactly why. Eli, you aren't that stupid." My jaw clenched as I held eye contact. "Neither is your brother. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐵. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐵. I was completely lost. "You don't think he knows what you've been doing?" Kieran asked, making me stiffen. "No. Jail couldn't." Kieran obviously noticed my distress, which he took the opportunity to laugh at. "Didn't you notice there were no guards down there? You think he'd just leave me there unguarded?" I could tell my face visibly paled in the moment as my blood ran cold. "He knew we would go down there." I questioned aloud. "He needed you guys down there." "He needed her. He wanted her to see me at my worst. He wanted me to scare her into not loving me. He wanted her to deny our bond," he said, sounding almost hurt. "That's why you wanted her to leave. I was not going to scare her like that. She doesn't deserve to see me like that." I love her far too much to have her leave me just because I can't control myself under some pressure," he muttered. It was then that I realized just how truly under control he really was. Most people get out of Lock 9 and can't even hold a conversation. Kieran looked and acted completely normal. He was the same cocky asshole that he was when Yol and Dad would question him. Kieran really was stronger and smarter than we all thought. Everything that I do is to protect her. Even if I must sacrifice her happiness, I will. Her safety is much more important to me, which is something that I know your parents and I can both agree on, seeing as how she doesn't seem too happy these days. Kieran continued talking. I quirked an eyebrows, idly questioning him. Mate Bon. I forgot about that. He feels all of her emotions. He would know when she was angry or stressed or happy. He was emotionally attached to her like she was to him. Yeah, you're not too good at controlling your emotions. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝. I snapped, knowing his attitude was making Grail lash out. Sorry that I'm locked in a cell while my mate is being forced to stay away from me. Please, let me write you an apology letter about how I'm the dickhead in this situation, he replied sarcastically. I frowned, knowing he wasn't in the wrong. It wasn't exactly his choice to be locked down here. Listen, I'm sorry, don't mention it. He brushed it off, sounding bored. Just be sure to tell my beautiful angel when you see her next time thank you for making that deal with you. Not from me, of course. I would love nothing more than to kill all of you. I'd make sure to kill you fast. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I actually like you. I wouldn't want you to feel any pain, he explained with a sadistic smile, making my face scrunch in disgust. What do you even say to that? Thank you. Like I said. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Her safety comes first. I'm simply agreeing to this deal to make her happy. But if I feel that killing you all slowly is necessary, don't think I won't, Kieran promised. Well, there it was. The shredder that I'm guessing Grain ever really got to meet. Chapter 25, Crimson A Week. That's how long it's been since Eli had Kieran moved back to his cell. That's how long Kieran has been howling every single night. That's how long it's been since I've even seen Kieran. A week, one long, exhausting week. After everything went down in Lock 9, I drug myself back up to my room. I sobbed and sobbed for hours until that sadness turned anger, and I resorted to just ripping the room apart. I wasn't sure if the anger I was feeling was Kieran's or my own, but I was wholeheartedly accepting it. I ripped the curtains from the windows, tore apart the fluffy, white pillows, punched about 7 holes in the walls, and shattered the mirror in my bathroom. Eli was not happy about it at all. In all honesty, I think it kind of scared him. Eli had me moved to another room until they could get mine cleaned up. The new room he placed me in was eerily similar to the last one. Creamy white walls, a connected bathroom, wooden floors, a large, queen-sized bed covered with a navy blue and light grey comforter, almost exactly the same. Although it was the same, I hated it 2 times more. The empty closet made me feel like I was in another place that I would never call home. I was just there for a little while. It wasn't really mine. I was just filling the space. I will admit, the bed in the new room was much comfier. That was the only thing I missed about the room when I moved back into my old room 3 days later. That same day I had begged Eli to let me see Kieran. I had been hearing his howls all through the night, making my wolf and I yearned for him. I didn't know the exact reason for his constant howling, but I wasn't going to make him stop. To most people, Kieran's howling was probably the most obnoxious thing they'd ever heard, but not to me. Hearing Kieran made butterflies erupt in my stomach. It comforted me knowing he was still down there. His howling actually helped me sleep through the night, even through all of the nightmares. As I had said, I begged Eli to let me see Kieran. Eli refused to let me down in the shadows. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He seemed extremely off about something ever since he had placed Kieran back in his cell. All week he kept saying that we should just stop going down to see him. Obviously. I objected. Then, I threw a small tantrum causing Eli to agree on taking me down to see Kieran at the end of the week. Since then I've been just sitting in my room or aimlessly roaming the pack house. I saw Aegon. Again. I met her mate. His name is Maverick. And he's a really nice guy. He's a lot nicer than Joel and Trevor considering all three of them are best friends. Well, that's what Reagan tells me. Other than that, I've resorted to being a lone wolf the past week. Staying out of people's ways and hoping they stay out of mine. Currently, I was very much succeeding in that. Eli, being the dear he is, brought me some coloring books yesterday. It sounds childish that a 17-year-old girl would be passing time by coloring in a children's coloring book. But it didn't bother me. I colored a lot in the mental hospital. It calmed me down. I was coloring a cartoon mouse's left you a light blue when a knock sounded against my bedroom door. I slowly raised my head to look at whoever was about to enter the door. "Come in," I said aloud. I wasn't used to people knocking. Usually, they just walked in unannounced. The door slowly opened. The blonde-haired beauty entering the door making my eyes widen. Her brown eyes were fixed on me as a smile graced her flawless face. Hi," I mumbled, not sure of what else to say to her. The last time I had spoken to 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬, Kieran marked me and snapped my neck. "Nice to see you again, Arden," she greeted sweetly. She walked gracefully over to me and stood in front of my bed. I was currently laying on my stomach with the book laying in front of me as a mass of colored pencils was scattered around my bed. "Can I sit?" 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬 asked. Yeah. I stumbled over my words as I pushed myself up into a sitting position. "Yay," I drug out. She shot me another award-winning smile before sitting down on the bed. "Pack gossip says that Kieran marked you." I nodded at her words. It wasn't really a secret. I didn't try to hide the mark. I was proud of it. Kieran is my mate, and it only seems right that everyone should know that. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I stated, showing her the mark at the base of my neck. Her eyes widened, and she seemed scared for a moment before her facial features returned to her usual comforting ones. "It's beautiful," she complimented, making me smile. "Of course it is." I pushed away my wolf-scocky comment with a chuckle. If only more people thought that. I joked with very little amusement. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬's bright smile turned to one of pity. Her brown eyes softened as she sat a comforting hand on my knee. "People are close-minded. Arden, don't let them spoil your happiness. They aren't worth it," she advised. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬 was a perfect helper. She did an amazing job of calming others down and making them feel important. She knew just what to say and when to say it. She was so young, but she seemed so good at the position. It was almost as if she had been doing this for 30 years. I could never be like that. I was supposed to be an alpha just like her, but I wasn't. Just like she was mated to Joel, I was mated to Kieran. I was supposed to help him lead. I was supposed to help him make all these important decisions and control his pack. But I could barely control myself. My wolf was a psychopath. I was a lunatic. And together we were a mess. There was no way I could ever be like 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬. "I've learned to just block most people out," I replied in a whisper. I fiddled with my hands as I stared down at them in my lap. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬's hand moved from my knee to my back. Her hand moved up and down my back as if she were trying to tell me everything was going to be okay. My parents didn't want me anywhere near Joel. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬𝐬, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alex and Grayson pretty much ripped my old pack apart when I was 5. Since then, the remaining members of my pack despised this pack. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐬 began. My eyes flickered up to meet hers. Sadness swam in the depths of them. "I met Joel when I was 17. He was 20 and literally insane." She chuckled. "He was coming to my pack talking about land agreements. Well, More like telling our alpha that if he didn't give him his land and pack, he would kill us all and take it himself. I was on a patrol when I met him. I rejected him, and then he kidnapped me. I hated him so much. Now, we're here 5 years later. She concluded, placing a hand on her slightly swollen stomach. Rejected him. I asked, not familiar with the term. It's when a wolf denies the mate bond. Stelletta explained. Makes sense. I mentally nodded, agreeing with my wolf. Who wouldn't reject my brother? He's a monster. Then again, people probably think the same thing about Kieran for reasons I don't entirely understand. So he kidnapped you? Yep, she nodded as anger crossed her features, recalling the memory. I tried so hard to get away from him, but nothing worked. Jael didn't accept the rejection like a normal person, and the bond stuck. He made a deal with me that if I stayed with him, then he wouldn't attack my old pack. I agreed, knowing that if I didn't, Jarl would surely rip them all apart. She paused as she stared down at her stomach angrily. Saying this out loud makes me sound crazy, but I do love him. A lot has happened in 5 years. She mumbled, rubbing her stomach. Her eyes snapped back up to me. Her lips formed a familiar smile. I know how it feels to love someone that everyone thinks is a monster because, well, he was just that to everyone else. He would never do anything to hurt me. Her words were full of understanding and pity. A lone tear fell from my right eye. I wasn't sure if I was crying because someone actually understood what I was going through, or because I just really wanted Kieran in that moment. Maybe a little bit of both. I wish more people saw things the way you did. I stated, wiping away another tear as it fell. Sometimes you just need to speak your mind. You have to use reason over violence, she advised, making me frown. I try, but she never listens. Go, Alex. I growled out through clenched teeth as my hands formed fists in my lap. Every time I try to explain, she gets mad. Then, we argue? If we both just go back to hating each other. I don't want to. 𝐿𝐸𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐊𝐸𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐸 𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐸 𝐿𝐸𝐸𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐿𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 I love Alex. I love Grayson. I love them. I just hate what they're doing. I hate how they don't listen. Make them listen. Stelletta left after that. We had a bit more of a conversation about the baby. She said she was still hoping for a girl even though she knew the chances of that were slim. She actually startled me when she said her and Jarl agreed to name the baby Gray if it were to be a girl. Jael was the one who came up with the idea. Once she left, I cleaned up the pencils, placing them into their boxes and stacked them onto the coloring book. My nerves were sort of a mess. My wolf was humming loudly, knowing I was about to confront Alex. It wasn't a secret that my wolf wasn't fond of Alex. But she didn't hate her. She knew that, in a way, Alex made me happy. Alex was my mother, and a part of me would always crave my mother no matter what she did. I knew that everything she did was out of wanting to protect me. I just don't think she understood the damage she was actually causing, or she just chose to ignore it. I slowly crept down the stairs until I reached the first floor of the pack house. I walked into the living room, earning me weird looks from pack members. I nodded at them, acknowledging them. 𝐿𝐸𝐷𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 𝐿𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 Without another word, I turned on my heel and made my way to the kitchen area. I entered the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. Alex was hurriedly rushing around while a little boy trailed behind her. He had chestnut brown hair and big green eyes that landed directly on me. Alex was too busy mixing something in a bowl to notice me. "You're just as bad as making cookies as your grandfather," Alex muttered, turning around to look down at the little boy, but caught sight of me instead. Her blue eyes widened as she stopped mixing the cookie batter in the bowl. 𝐿𝐸𝐷𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐀𝐀�𝐀𝑀 Why don't you go find Finn? Alex asked, not removing her gaze from me. Dunno where he's at. The little boy who Alex referred to as Ander replied as he stood up on his toes to look into the bowl in Alex's hands. Well, Alex began as she looked down and shoved the bowl into Ander's little hands. Why don't you go find him? I'm sure he's around here somewhere. He'll come around once he smells cookie dough. With that, Andrew bounced out of the kitchen and taking a handful of cookie dough out of the bowl and plopping it into his mouth. Who was that? I asked once the little boy was out of sight. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐥𝐼𝐬 𝐑𝐞𝐝𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐥𝐼𝐬. Your cousin, Alex answered, watching me carefully. I knew she was probably mentally freaking out considering I hadn't spoken to her since the whole Loch 9 incident. My brother, 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐥𝐼𝐬 𝐑𝐞𝐝𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Grandson. Oh, I mumbled, chewing on the inside of my cheek as my wolf called me a wimp. Who's Finn? Finley is Anders' brother. They're twins. Alex explained, giving me a small smile. You have other cousins too. Winston, their dad. Maya, Winnie's sister. Dylan, my younger brother's daughter. She's a little older than you. You have another brother. A smile graced her beautifully tired face at the thought of her brother. Yay, his name's Ashton. Her smile then faded to a small frown. He lives in Germany. I furrowed my brows. You're from Germany? No. Complicated story that could seriously be turned into a 40-chapter novel. She muttered as she rubbed her right eye tiredly. I wanted so badly to hear about it, but decided it would be best to hear it another day. Mate. I sucked in a large breath, knowing that my wolf was not going to let me leave here until I talked to my mother about Kieran. I need to talk to you about Kieran, I stated, hoping that my voice didn't sound as scared as I felt on the inside. Alex's eyes wide and as her jaw clenched. What about him? She asked as she moved her hand to an area on her stomach. I wanted to ask why she had done that, but decided not to. I didn't want to get off track. You need to stop hurting him. You need to feed him them. All of them need fed. I could feel the power of my voice coming off in waves. Alex could too. I knew she could by the way she seemed to lean away from me slightly. I wasn't used to this at all. I wasn't sure if this was even me talking. Mate coming through bond. That made a lot of sense. Gray. Kieran is dangerous. He's never hurt me. I defended, feeling the power slip away from my voice slightly as vulnerability slipped in. Way to go. Odin. Way to stay strong. He snapped your neck, so what? I'm fine. I shouted, trying to stay calm, but failing miserably. Stiletto would be so disappointed. He could have killed you. No, he wouldn't have. Gray, stop calling me that. That's not my name. I expected her to get angry, but instead I saw sadness flash through her features. You don't mean that? Alex mumbled. I could practically feel the vulnerability in her voice. It made me even more upset. You never listen to me. How can you act like you care if you don't even know what I want? Gray. I'm listening. I'm listening. I shook my head violently. No, you never do. You hear me, but you never listen. I shouted as I saw Grayson enter the kitchen in a panic. Please. Just listen to me, Mom. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Alex froze. Even Grayson froze. We all just stood there staring at each other. I'd never actually called Alex my mom before. My wolf was silent. I couldn't tell if she was proud that I stood up to Alex or angry that I lashed out. Either way, she was not talking to me. Grayson slowly made his way over to me. His grey eyes held so much emotion that I was not used to seeing. My heart broke seeing him like this. I knew he never showed much emotion. I had been here for a while now, and this was maybe the second time I'd ever seen him not scowling. Gray, Grayson said quietly. His hand came up to grab my forearm, but I quickly snatched it away from him. I hugged my arm to my chest. Grayson's frown deepened as his hand fell back down to his side. I could hear Alex's quiet cries. I craned my neck to look over to her. Her hand covered her mouth to muffle her sobs as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. That's not my name, I mumbled, turning my gaze to the tiled floor, which now seemed much more interesting than my parents. I need air. I was outside in what felt like seconds. I kept my head down as I left the kitchen and bounded out the front door. I didn't know where I was going, seeing as I hadn't ever left the pack house. I was just running. I knew that I wouldn't get far. 𝐿𝐲 had explained to me that if I tried escaping the territory, the trolls would just bring me back. There was no escaping. I broke down in the middle of nowhere. Tears poured from my eyes as I sunk to the forest floor. I wasn't too far from the house, but I was surrounded by trees. I felt alone, and that felt as close to home as I was going to get. I was used to being alone, and at times like this, I enjoyed it. Sobs wrecked my body as I pulled on my dark brown hair. I rocked my body back and forth, ignoring the feeling of sticks and rocks poking at my bottom and legs. I felt like an idiot. I felt weak. I was never going to be able to get Kieran, Marilyn, and Bolton out. I was useless. I'm so sorry. I cried to literally no one. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I don't know what to do anymore. If I could take your place, I would, but I can't. And I'm sorry. I sobbed, wrapping my arms around my knees and burying my head in them. I cried for Kieran. I cried from him being locked in that cell. I cried for him being starved. I cried for him being put in lock 9. I cried because I knew he wasn't getting out. I couldn't get him out. I cried for Marilyn. I cried for her losing her mate. I cried for her being abused by my family. I cried for her unmanicured nails, which probably bothered the hell out of her. I cried because I knew she was never going to find love again. She was never getting out. I cried for Bolton. I cried for Eli. I cried for my mom and dad. Jarl and 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐬's old pack. I cried for Gray and Arden. I cried for 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐩𝐿. I just cried. I just couldn't hold it together anymore. Not happy. I shook my head. No, I'm not happy. Mate safe. Can we please not do this today? I can't keep thinking he's safe when he's not. I whispered, shaking my head as the tears stopped. Mate safe. Please. Stop. I begged, feeling my head begin to pound from the minutes spent crying. Make safe. To my 𝐊𝐲𝐸𝐾𝐜𝐈 𝐊𝐲𝐸𝐻𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐲𝐳𝐸𝐾𝐜𝐬. Knock it off, I shouted, looking up from my lap. I didn't expect to make eye contact with anyone, but I did, standing just feet in front of me. My eyes connected with a pair of crimson red ones. I gasped in shock as my heart rate sped up. The red eyes were barely noticeable. I could just barely see the wolf that they belonged to until it stepped out from the brush where it had been hiding. Dark brown head lowered to me, almost as if it were bowing. I didn't know what to say as I just sat there with my mouth open. Mate safe. My wolf repeated as the large wolf backed away into the forest once again. I shook my head. I've seen Kieran's wolf before, as well as Bolton and Marilyn's. That wasn't any of them. But I knew those eyes. Pack wolves had black eyes when their wolves came out. That I knew due to seeing Eli. Yeah, and some other pack members get mad. But shredders aren't pack wolves. Those red eyes belong to a shredder. Chapter 26, a puzzle. Let down your hair, nothing worked. No matter how much I tossed and turned. No matter how many sheep I counted, or how many deep breaths I took, I could not fall asleep. The howling that once put me to sleep in seconds now only reminded me of the crimson eyes of the wolf from earlier. Being the coward that I am, I bolted for the house, not sparing the wolf a second glance. Alex and Grayson were still in the kitchen as I ripped the door open and bounded up the stairs to my room, which I then locked myself in. I could hear 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐻𝐿 crying. It was hunting me. 𝐿𝐲 must have heard the commotion, because soon after his worried knock sounded on my locked door. I didn't answer, hoping he would just assume I were asleep. I was far too much of milksop to mention the shredder encounter to Eli. What if they locked it away like Marilyn, Bolton, and Kieran? What if it was lost? Then again, the thought did cross my mind of what if it's here to do what Alex claims shredders are made to do? What if it's here to murder not only the entire Cadman pack but Kieran, Marilyn, Bolton, and myself too? It felt wrong thinking that way, but what if Alex was right? It was constant thoughts like these that brought on the memories of the blood, red eyes. I stared straight ahead of me, my grey eyes making perfect contact with the white ceiling above me. I smoothed my left hand over the left side of the bed, remembering how it felt to have Kieran lay with me. He loved the left side of the bed. I missed how he would play with my pinky and ring finger while he thought I was asleep. I missed how he would hold my hand while we slept because he knew I wasn't entirely comfortable with him holding me. Now I craved to be held by him. I craved to feel his lips on mine again, and his arms around my waist. I craved to hear that annoyingly sexy snarl he always did when Bolton would call me princess, or baby just to get on his nerves. I craved him, but it was only a craving. Kieran was not going to end up laying next to me in the next minute. He was not going to tell me that my kicks could barely knock over a small, unstable chair. He wasn't going to tell me to go back to sleep for a few more minutes just so that he could spend a little more time holding my hand. Kieran was down in those cellars, and there wasn't much I could do about it. That killed me. I slowly rolled over to the right, seeing as I make sure never to lay on the left side of the bed, and read the digital clock on my nightstand. 247 am. I groaned loudly, running my hands down my face as another one of Kieran's howls sounded through the house, no doubt driving a lot of people mad. 247. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐧 𝐷𝐞𝐝𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience and enthusiasm. I asked aloud to literally no one. I turned to look at the clock again, seeing the 7 turn into an 8. Jesus Christ. I'm going to bash my head in with this clock, I muttered, picking up the clock and squeezing it in my hands. Break, you stupid thing, I shouted in a whisper. I squeezed a bit tighter, causing the screen on the clock to shatter. I smiled triumphantly as I set the clock back down on the table. My smile turned to scowl as I watched the 8 turn to a 9. I hate you. I rolled away from the clock and faced the left side of the bed. My hand reached out to once again skim the covers where Kieran should be laying, even if it wasn't really our bed. I love you, too, I whispered, recalling Kieran saying it when he had marked me. I wish you could hear me say that. I'm not afraid anymore. Pushing myself to look away from the left side of the bed, I found myself staring back at the ceiling. I sighed, staring at the random brushstrokes. You know, I wish I could have what's that movie called? The girl with the long hair. It was made when Mom was little. I asked, talking to myself. I snapped my fingers, trying to recall the name of the movie that I had seen once or twice in the orphanage. Tangled. That's it, I recalled with a victorious smile. I wish I could have a Tangled moment where I stare at my ceiling and realize that my psycho parents aren't my parents, and that the guy that everyone thinks is a bad guy isn't actually a bad guy. He actually really cares about me. He's just a little screwed up in the head. And he has those 2 little sidekick people. But they don't try to kidnap me. Well, I mean Meryl and Dad. I drug out, scratching my chin. Maybe I'm more puzzle. I shook my head. Great. Just what I need, another name. Deciding that talking to myself at 3 in the morning probably wasn't the most sane thing in the world, I pushed myself out of bed and walked out of my room. True. I was definitely not supposed to be out of my room. It was past pack curfew. I highly doubt I would get in trouble. But if the pack house guards saw me, they could send me back to my room. That's why I was extra careful, making my way to my old room, looking both ways to make sure no one was watching me. I pushed open the wooden door to be greeted with a familiar setting. The same baby room that I have come to feel comforted by surrounded me. I slowly shut the door behind me and made my way over to the TV. What to watch tonight? I drug out, tapping my finger to my tooth as I stared at the massive home movies. Am I feeling honeymoon stage, Alex and Grayson, or parent stage? So many options. I mumbled before just choosing a random movie out of the pile that had orked 2017 written on it. I quietly placed the movie into the TV and waited for it to play. Happy birthday to you. Oh my God, I shouted in a whisper as I rushed to turn the blasting volume of the television down. Once the volume was set to a solid 6, I returned my attention back to the screen. Alex was blowing out candles. She was wearing a hat that said, "Happy birthday." Grayson was standing behind her with his arms wrapped around her waist. His chin sat on her shoulder. Alex was smiling. She was actually smiling. "Did you make a wish?" Grayson asked. Alex nodded. "Yeah. I wished you would get off of me." She laughed as she jokingly pushed him away. "Not what you said last night." Grayson fired back. "Why do I always choose these videos? I asked myself as I leaned forward to fast forward the movie. A few seconds later, a new video started playing. Grayson and Alex were both sleeping on the couch. Grayson was behind Alex, her small body being held against him in his tight grasp. She didn't seem fazed. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Grayson seemed to be sleeping like an angel while Alex not so much. Her mouth hung open while her hand was flailed backward laying on Grayson's face. They both looked so young. Alex looked like she couldn't be much older than me. The camera then jostled and shakily turned dangerously close to a little boy's face. His dark brown hair was messily tousled on the top of his head. Big, grey eyes stared widely down at the camera as a dimple showed on his left cheek. It was why Mommy told them to sleep in their room. They never listen. Nope, he stated, popping the pea. Bubba's always sleeping. Riley continued rambling about how Bubba doesn't play with him anymore, and how Alex promised to take him for ice cream every Monday because 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 Mondays suck ass. I laid back on the floor and stared back up at the ceiling. When do I get my 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 after? As usual. No one answers. Just me. And my wolf, who only ever decides to make an appearance when I don't want her to. I huffed and rolled over on my stomach, facing away from the TV. I folded my hands over top of each other and set my chin on top of them. I was facing my old wooden crib. The old wooden crib that no doubt I was taken from. 7 a.m. The usual morning lineup. Start on the chores and sweep till the floor's all clean. I sang, remembering one of the songs from Tangled. Polish and wax. Do laundry. And I froze as I caught something glinting off of the light from the television. What the heck? I mumbled, reaching my arm under the crib. I squeezed myself as close to the crib as possible until my fingers just nipped the edge of the object. Come on, I growled out as I slowly brought the object into my grasp. Once I had a firm hold on it, I brought it out from under the crib. I furrowed my brows together, staring at the silver-colored object. A camera. I pressed a random button on the top that I assumed would turn it on. It did nothing. I groaned and opened the battery slot. 𝐴 batteries. Great. I did a quick sweep of the room before finding a remote. I opened the back of it to find for 𝐴 batteries. Jackpot. I smiled as I put 2 of the batteries before pressing the button again. A screen popped out of the top of it as it started displaying colors. My mouth dropped, realizing that no doubt was this the camera Alex and Grayson had used to make all of those movies. This is it, I said in disbelief. My fingers fumbled around, pressing any and all of the buttons. I was completely unfamiliar with the small object, but I was so intrigued by it. My heart stopped with one press of a little circular button. A video popped up with a familiar face. I lightly traces the play button on the camera, not sure if I really wanted to watch the video. I wasn't sure if I was ready to watch the video. Click. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice coming out strained. His dark brown hair was a mess. His grey eyes were dull, but completely surrounded by red, making me assume he had been crying. Not only were they red, but they were puffy. His cheeks were flushed. His clothes were slightly torn, but only dirty for the most part. And his hands were blotched in red. I could only assume it was blood. His well-built body rocked back and forth on a rocking chair in front of my crib. The camera seemed to have been placed on the TV stand. Oh my God. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I covered my mouth with my hand as I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Riley, I have to do this. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐝 heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Riley shouted, running his hands angrily through the dark brown mop on his head. A tear rolled down his cheek as he bowed his head down to face the floor. If I don't, they will. This is the only way I will know she'll be safe. His fists came down on the arms of the rocking chair, making a crack. He slowly looked back up to the camera as a baby's cry rang through the room. My blood ran cold. That was my cry. Please, don't hate me, Riley pleaded into the camera. I didn't miss the crimson red swimming in the depths of his grey eyes. I'll get her back. I have a plan. And when I get her back, then we can all be a family. Again, he said, almost as if he were trying to convince himself. You'll see. Dad will see. He'll see I'm not just some runner. I can fight. Too. I'm smart. Then, he'll let me stay. Yeah. He won't make me leave. Hot tears races down my cheeks, just as Riley's did. He was looking around the room frantically, almost as if hoping someone would come in and stop him. Allie, please. You got to understand, I'm doing this for her. I gotta do this. If I don't, they will. They'll take her. They'll ruin her. He sobbed, burying his face in his hands as he shook. My lip trembled. My heart was beating wildly against my ribcage as I watched Riley stand up the chair and lean over the crib. He pulled me out and held me in his arms protectively. Gray, I won't let them hurt you, he promised as I cried wickedly in his shaky arms. He then turned to face the camera. Allie, 𝐿𝐤𝐳𝐸 𝐷𝐞𝐜𝐬 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐭 Y'all, Eli, Riley, let's go. A female voice interrupted with a sharp knock on the door, making Riley's face freeze. His face visibly paled as his attention went from the camera. To the door. Back to me. To the door. And then the camera. I'm sorry, Riley said hurriedly before running away from the camera's sight with me in his arms. Seconds later, a woman appeared. She looked around the room quickly as if looking for something. Her blue eyes landed on the camera. Instantly, they softened as a frown formed on her face. Oh, Riley, she whispered, walking over to the camera and taking it into her hands. They're never going to forgive you, she stated sadly. She then tossed the camera under the crib. From there, I watched as she walked out of my room in black combat boots. I lifted my head up to look at the television screen, pressing the power button on the camera. Grayson was currently eating a grape while Alex was doing her best to carve a pumpkin. She said something about thinking of the pumpkin being Liam's head, which I did not quite understand. I moved my gaze back down to the camera before rolling it back under the crib. Riley, I forgive you. Chapter 27, Alpha Wannabe. How do you sleep after watching your own abduction? I'll tell you. You don't. Kieran's howling continued on through the night until about 4 a.m. Not hearing him put my wolf and I on edge. What was I going to do? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's not like I could make Eli take me down to the cellars at 4 a.m. to tell Kieran to keep howling because it's the only thing keeping me sane. No, that would be weird. I resorted to just going down to the main floor and laying on the couch in the living room. I didn't bother turning on the television. I just sat there on the couch staring out the window, hoping to maybe see those blood-red eyes again. I never did. It was around 5:30 when people started to actually wake up in the house. Some people from outside came in from doing the perimeter runs. I would hate to do night shift. I'd be scared out of my mind. Other people came and went. Most people in the pack house were teens and young adults, so a majority of people left for work, seeing as the local schools don't start for like another 2 weeks. I think people chose to ignore me. I purposely moved to the rocking chair in the center of the room, just so someone would make eye contact with me. But no one ever did. I actually want to be friendly, and this is how it goes. I gave up about an hour and a half later. The kitchen smelled much nicer than the living room anyway. After relaxing in the kitchen just watching people do whatever they needed to for probably a good hour, I went back to my room. I walked in, immediately becoming confused. Hello. I greeted Eli, who was sat on the edge of my bed. He furrowed his eyebrows looking at me before looking at the bathroom door and back at me. I thought you were in the bathroom, he mumbled. Why do you close your bathroom door? I don't know. I replied slowly, still not understanding why he was just sitting in my bed. Did you need something? No, he shook his head. Just came to check on you. Dad was worried that Kieran was going crazy last night because you weren't okay. That made sense. The last time Kieran went crazy was because he thought y'all was beating the life out of me to get answers that I didn't know. I'm fine. I just couldn't sleep hearing him and all. I mumbled, walking over to Eli and sitting beside him. He gave me a small smile. Yeah, I understand. You do? I asked, making him nod. I couldn't sleep very well. 𝐿𝐸𝐻𝐿 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰𝐴𝐻𝐿. I don't know. Hearing him howling like that is sort of scary. It's almost haunting, he explained. He really didn't understand. Eli couldn't fall asleep because he was afraid of Kieran, and his constant howling reinforced that fear. I, on the other hand, could not sleep because the feelings I had toward him weren't fear but longing. I missed him, and thinking about him caused a hurricane to stir up in my stomach. That's not what scares me. I spoke up, looking away from him and staring at the closed bathroom doors. What scares me is the fact that we haven't even been here very long, 2 months or something, and I can't stand to think about being without him for another week, let alone another 10 years. I'm trying to hold it together. Eli, I'm trying to be a good daughter, good sister, but I gotta be a good mate too. Eli placed a large hand comfortingly onto my thigh, causing my eyes to find his again. Blue eyes looked torn. It was almost as if he knew what I was going through. Almost like he knew how torn I was between picking my family or my mate. I knew both of them for only short periods of time, but they both wanted what was best for me. I felt awful because I knew that I would have to pick one in the end. Eli looked as if he wanted to say something. It was almost like there was almost a secret on the tip of his tongue that wanted to spill out. His eyes searched my face. I furrowed my brows as I watched his expression go from one of sadness to a stoic expression much like yours as he looked away from me. We each sat there in silence. His hand crept away from my thigh and met its twin in Eli's lap. I bit my lips, staring at the door in front of me. I felt guilty. Do I tell Eli about the shredder? Do I tell my own brother about the wolf that so many pack wolves fear of, or just keep it a secret? Could I live with myself knowing that I was the reason another person was locked in a cell? Could I live with myself knowing I was the reason half of a pack was slaughtered like Alex said shredders do? One wolf wasn't capable of that, was it? No, I couldn't tell Eli. I refused to believe shredders were what Alex had tried so hard to tell me. I refused to believe that Marilyn, Bolton, and Kieran were killers even though the evidence was already in front of me. I pushed away the thought of Kieran killing the red-headed girl or of Marilyn trying to murder me in the park. There was no way a person could do that. The wolf that I saw yesterday wasn't a killer. He was just lost. Yeah, lost. That's all. The shredder with the deep, crimson eyes was just lost. Eli, I said, interrupting the silence amongst us. His eyes snapped to mine. His baby blues were glazed over, with tears causing a pang in my heart. This whole situation was tearing him apart. Can you tell me about Alphys? I asked, which seemed to startle him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐿. He repeated with a tilt of his head. Yeah. Kieran told me a little bit. He tends to not tell me much. I said, remembering all the times you would get upset about certain things like his childhood but never tell me why. Kieran was a pretty closed-off person. What do you want to know? Eli asked, scratching his wrist, obviously a bit uncomfortable talking about it. I wondered why he seemed so weird talking about it, but decided not to ask. Everything. Why they're so important. What they do. How they come about to being alpha. I just want to know. I explained. Eli's face seemed to drain of color slightly. He nodded his head with a clenched jaw as his eyes looked down at his lap. Alphas are the leaders of a pack. They are supposed to make the best decisions for the pack. But not all alphas do that. Some just use their packs for bad. For violence. He said angrily as his blue eyes narrowed onto his hands in his lap. It's not even very fair if you ask me, because alphas aren't even chosen. Why aren't they chosen? Eli's eyes connected with mine again. Their darkness swam within the depths of them. Alphas pass the title of alpha down to their firstborn child. Having the bloodline of an alpha makes a wolf stronger than everyone else in the pack. An alpha is the biggest wolf in the pack. He's the leader. No one would dare to rival Alpha Wolf for his position. They would be slaughtered. He stated with an angry expression. He seemed almost frustrated. Did you want to be the alpha? I asked, sort of connecting the dots. Jael was our older brother, so he was handed down the title of alpha. Something in me told me that Eli didn't really appreciate that much. Eli sucked in a deep breath. I'm not saying that I want to be alpha. I'm just saying that we wouldn't have the problems we do if y'all wasn't. We got quiet after that. I didn't know what to say. And by the expression on Eli's face, I didn't want to push the whole y'all subject much more. I had an inkling that Eli didn't get along with our older brother very well. I almost wanted to laugh out loud. I had imagined my life so differently in the orphanage and hospital. I always thought that I would find my parents, and they would welcome me with open arms. They would hate themselves for the mistake they made by giving me up. I always imagined that I'd have a brother or sister and maybe even a dog. Not that I'd have two brothers who turn into dogs. That never even crossed my mind. Tell me about alpha females. I spoke up, breaking the silence again. Lunas. What the heck is a Luna? Eli seemed slightly amused by my comment. He shook his head at me. It's an alpha female. But pack wolves normally just call her Luna. Eli said. Oh well then yeah. Eli sighed, followed by a deep intake of air. His hands moved up and down his thighs, seeming like he were calming himself down. Still, it is a Luna. She's y'all's mate. He's the alpha, as you know, which makes her the Luna. She's good at her position. But if you ask me, I don't think she really wants to be here. He mumbled. Why do you say that? His eyes looked down sadly as a frown formed on his pale, pink lips. A lot of shit happened between the two of them that no one was supposed to know. The only reason I know about it is because Stillity came to me for help. I didn't really help much. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was 16. What the hell was I going to do? He ranted angrily as his hands formed fists. There was glint in his eye at the thought of Stilletta. A glint that I saw in Kieran's eye every once in a while when he would look at me. Go up against an alpha? Yeah. Right. He mumbled to himself. I don't think he thought I heard him, so I decided to just let him believe I hadn't. I'm sure that you did all that you could have done. Eli, I said, placing a comforting hand onto his arm. My wolf was silent, which was unusual. I wondered where her weird humming or angry screams were. They definitely weren't here. I guess. His eyes were trained on my hand that whipped along his muscular arm. I wanted to do more, but I couldn't. Y'all's my alpha, and I have to follow and respect his orders. It's the same with the rest of the pack. We may not agree with him, but we do have to respect him. You have to. Eli didn't bother looking up at me. He just nodded. If we don't submit to him, he'll make sure that we wish we did, he said, rubbing a large scar on his arm that I had never noticed before. I bit the inside of my cheek, feeling my heart rate speed up. Jail didn't. He wouldn't. He would never hurt his own little brother. Was he? He wouldn't actually hurt Eli just because he didn't submit. Was he? Just because Eli wouldn't cower away and bow in the presence of his own brother. My eyes grew at the thought. Eli, what do you mean by submit? I shot out. He looked up at me, noticing the sudden urgency in my voice. Like bowing your head and not looking your alpha or Luna in the eye. That sort of stuff, why? Eli countered, making my blood run cold. That wolf that shred about his head to me, no. Marilyn and Bolton are the only members of Kieran's little pack. That was it. The three of them. Right. I'm not going crazy. There was only three of them. Nothing. I spoke quietly, not looking Eli in the eye. How was I supposed to tell him that a shredder was acting submissive towards me? I couldn't. Gray, you're an awful liar. What the hell is wrong? Eli pushed, forgetting his anger from moments ago. I just shook my head, leaning away from him. It's nothing. I swear. It's just I'm tired. And I can feel Kieran's emotions through the bond. He's upset or something. I don't know. It's making my wolf upset. I was surprised that my lie actually had managed to convince Eli. Why are Shredder's eyes red? I asked before Eli had the opportunity to change his mind and realize my little white lie. They aren't. Kieran's are green, Eli stated. I glared at him. No, you know I mean. Your eyes turn black. Theirs don't. Why are theirs red? Eli's jaw clenched. It's their wolves. A Shredder's wolf is on a permanent bloodlist. It's dangerous, he explained. I don't understand it very well. I don't think many people do. It's just passed down generation through generation, I guess. Savage wolves birthing savage wolves. It's like a mutation, I guess. That's why you're all so scared of them. It's their wolves. Their wolves kill people. I stated, slowly connecting the dots. Kieran wasn't a killer, but that didn't mean his wolf wasn't. Grey. Our wolves are a part of us. There's always a little bit of us in our wolves. The color drained from my cheeks as I shook my head. No, I'm not my wolf. Marilyn's not her wolf. Bolton isn't his wolf. And Kieran isn't either. Kieran isn't an animal. And neither I. What color are my eyes? I snapped, hurriedly staring Eli dead in the eyes. Grey, Eli said simply, his facial features all turning quite stoic as he let the question sink in. Eli, that's not what I meant. What are they? I repeated. Eli's jaw clenched as his blue eyes scanned my face before settling back onto mine. They're black. Grey. You're a pack wolf. Kieran can't change that.